Good evening, everyone. Reconvening the March 3rd Board of Supervisor meeting. And there was no closed meeting, so we'll move directly into public comment. During public comment, I'm going to keep it to 5 minutes per person, please. And if you'll come up and give us your name and the district you're in, I would appreciate that. Anyone wishing to speak?
Oh, that was easy.
Yeah.
I was waiting for someone else to do it.
They're waiting for you.
John Sullivan, Hampton District. What is there to say? One, I mean this sincerely, I want to thank all of you for all of the work that you've done this summer. It's not an easy task. I think it's very hard to pull things together. And I think the work that the consultants have done is really extraordinary. So that's good news. I understand there's a need, obviously, for new equipment. And a lot of work is going into that. And we've heard the requests from the judges as what's needed in the various constituent services. But it's like really big. And it's like really, really expensive. And I can't help but think it's bigger and more expensive than just about anybody was anticipating. And in terms of size, roughly speaking, you already know this and tell me what you know, but I'm going to say, it's 8 times the size of this building. 8 times. And the drawings are fabulous, the renderings. But I'm not saying this was done on purpose at all. But they're all done at such an angle that it really looks quite beautiful along K Street. But if you were to do a rendering of the side or the back of this proposed building, or look at the info you got there where you look from the sky down, you realize how big this sucker is. And in terms of cost, obviously depends on, it can be refined, but pick $24 million as a number that's been suggested. And that spread out over 30 years at, if I understand the numbers right, payments of $1.4 million a year. $1.4 million a year for 30 years. I hate to say this to you. It's like when you buy a house and you get the disclosure statement and you look at the mortgage sheet and you're thinking you're taking a mortgage out for $500,000 and you look at what you're going to pay over 30 years if you paid the whole thing off. You go, holy shit, this is not serious. Well, this is a commitment of $42 million. 30 years times $1.4 million. And unlike your own house, which odds are you're going to sell somewhere along the way, and you're going to get off the mortgage, this is a commitment for 30 years. And that is going to really tie up this county in terms of its own finances with that kind of borrowing, I think. And so what does one do? I don't actually have the answer, except to suggest that do we really need to courtrooms? And I've heard the arguments, I really respect. I mean, these are people who work here. So I hesitate to say, do we really need 2 now? Or do we need 2 now? Do we do something 5 or 10 years from now? When I hear that we got to build something for the next 30 or 40 or 50 years, yeah, I guess so. I mean, these buildings have been here forever. But no one has the slightest idea what this world's going to be like in 30 or 40, 50 years, or what our needs are going to be. No one has the slightest idea. Now, is there a way to do something in sort of a modular format where you do X now and, okay, 10 or 12, 15 years from now you need to do Y, can you add it on there? I don't know if that's a good idea or not, I don't know. But I plead with you to question the assumptions. And yes, we want a beautiful courthouse. I'd be in here a month from now saying, you're gonna create something ugly, you're not spending enough money, and I'm gonna say spend more money because it should be beautiful for the town, so. But that's my, that's what I got to say. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Hi, Sheila Gressinger, Hampton District. First, I want to actually commend the Rappahannock News because when they did put the picture of the courthouse on the front page of the paper, they did put it to show the perspective of what it was actually going to look like as you drove down the street. And the renderings also helped because they showed greenery. Because when you look at the courthouse now, you see the trees and everything. And before, we just saw renderings of stark buildings. It was like, oh, good God, which made it look even worse. This actually helped people understand how it was going to look. Now, that aside, it is a large building. However, for a long time, we have not done anything about this courthouse, which has made the situation rather dire if you've listened to the people who actually work in the courthouse, the judges, the clerks, the sheriff, all the people who say the need is huge. That doesn't mean the building has to be so huge. Now, here's another thing. In the presentation this evening, I would hope that we would be able to see the interiors of the building, because then you're going to see the size of the courtrooms, the size of the various offices and things. And my point is, look at this room. If you were to take a foot off this room on each side, the length of the building, look how much you would reduce the size of the building. So I think there are ways to reduce the size of the building without taking away from the importance of the various rooms and structures and things that need to be put in there. Like they've said you have to have, they want a place to have the prisoners apart from the people who are coming in. There are all kinds of logistical situations that you have to deal with to make this a safe place. And what they've said in prior meetings, people have said, oh, well, nothing has happened here. Well, we don't have to wait till something happens, okay? And what the sheriff has said, because it's not our county that has crime, it's people who are passing through, and their workload is higher because of that. So that's what we're facing. We're facing a very interesting world. So I think I am very proud of the work that's been done, and I'm certainly hoping that we can go forward in a way that makes it affordable. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Caroline Edstein, Hampton. I spoke last time, so I'm not really pleased to know I'm going to repeat all that. I did want to say something about opportunity cost. We're living at a time of great change. We don't know where the world will be. We know there may be cuts to federal funds. We don't know where state funds are going to go. We know there may be needs in our own county for whatever it may be, housing, childcare, services. I'm concerned that if we wrap up so much money on the judiciary, it really doesn't leave anything, any space for any other needs that the county may face going forward. Do we want to put so many of our eggs into the judicial basket, so to speak? Secondly, I want to maybe talk about mixed messages. A year ago, we were talking about one courthouse with maybe some flexi space. Now we're very fixed on it has to be two, and it has to have all the bells and whistles. And I do believe this is a Rolls Royce of a courthouse. It's not a serviceable Toyota. Like, what are the mixed messages? We originally heard that we would have needs, and rather than building for today, we need to build for tomorrow and 30 years out and 40 years out. At the same time, we hear that we have needs now for 2 courthouses. And I would suggest on the question of, can we as a generation invest in the one courthouse with the flexi space so that the next, if you like, group, if the need is there, can build on. It can be something that can be expanded, and that's like saying we'll assume 50% as a county of a 2 courthouse plan, but the next house we will build if needed down the road. Because I think we need to be really clear, do we need the 2 now? Or are these things that we're going to be doing for the courts so that we can be used more by other surrounding counties, other richer surrounding counties who perhaps were in a better position to invest in courthouses? So again, thank you very much to the designers. It's a big, big investment for the taxpayers of Rappahannock County. And I think it's great that you're doing it in this transparent way, but it's something that people have to think about. Is this the priority for their taxpayer money?
Sorry, Jean.
That's right. Joe White, Hampton District, and the Mayor of Little Washington. I want to echo what a lot of the folks said. I know that you guys worked really hard to get us to this point, to take this first step on the road to building a new courthouse, and I've talked to several members of the board along the way. I know my constituents have engaged with the board along the way to find a good solution for the court staff going forward. But I do have to echo, the concerns of my constituents when it comes to the size of the proposed courthouse and the cost. I think Caroline put it very well at the meeting on Monday, which I wasn't able to attend to watch the coverage from. The largest building down on Rush River is a third of the size you are considering. I had to call over to the school board today to ask about the high school. The high school is 70,000 square feet, so you're looking at building a building half the size of the high school, and that includes the gym, and cramming it into a little lot just down the street here. And I want folks to really think about what that's going to look like when it's built. I mean, it's beautiful. I love the new renderings and all that sort of thing, but it's really a massive structure. And I agree that, along this way, we've had a lot of conversations about the requirements of the court, whether we need 2 courtrooms or 1 courtroom, the requirements from the Supreme Court that we build in a certain way. And I know the court load, it was curious to me, so I went back and sort of looked at the judicial summaries for the last 10 years. And the cases filed in Rappahannock Circuit and District Court has not changed dramatically in 10 years. It's pretty consistently about 4,400 cases. About 400 of those cases on the Circuit Court, 437 was the average for the cases on the Circuit Court side, and about 4,000-ish on average on the District Court sides. It will not surprise many of you to know that about 3,000 to 4,000 of those cases on the District Court side are traffic violations, which I know our hard-working troopers and deputies welcoming folks to the county out until 11 on the weekend, and I appreciate their hard work. But it's to this common theme of, that's pretty consistent. We all can't look off into the future, but as of the last census, there's 7,300 residents in Rappahannock County, give or take a half dozen. We have done everything in our power, this board, your predecessors, the town government, to ensure slow growth in this county. You'd have to build 2 or 3 Clevenger's Corners in this county to substantially increase that population to 8,000. And you do the math to roll down the statistical impact on the load for the courts. It doesn't add up to say that we should need 2 courthouses. I know from sort of anecdotal comments from some of the staff, it's hard for the county to cobble together a single jury, let alone 2. And I think Art commented at a previous meeting he couldn't even remember the last time they had a requirement to impanel 2 juries. So it's hard to imagine. We're all being asked to look into the future, but if you look at history and try to judge the future, it's hard to imagine a trajectory where we're going to need to have this two courtroom, massive structure anytime, certainly not in any of our lifetimes. It's hard to imagine in our lifetime. I've been here for a while, but that we're going to need it. I would also point out, I think Ms. Smith brought it up during the last meeting, commenting about there's no real plan to reuse this room. And Gary mentioned toward the end, well, maybe there's some hybrid approach here. For those 4,000 traffic violations, I'm not really sure why the judge couldn't quietly sit in here and deal with folks who are coming through. Not most of those aren't going to go to court, but having spent my fair amount of time, having spent a small amount of time in traffic court, it's usually a pretty placid affair. You come in, you act contrite, you get your ruling and move on. So I'm not questioning that, that's not the ideal setup, but I think we need to think more thoughtfully about how to reuse this building and consider what we're going to do down the road. And I know we're going to quote some statistics tonight about potential tax impacts, but as Keir, I think, knocked around at the end of the last meeting, let's just say for practical purposes, this $24 million bond, 6 cents increase in property taxes on 100. The median home price in this county is $490,000. The median home price. The per capita income in this county is only $57,000. So for that median homeowner, this is an extra $290 a year in taxes. When you're making $57,000 a year, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for me. And I think the board needs to think very carefully about imposing that. Caroline mentioned there's lots of other challenges that may come down the road. This board has struggled repeatedly with how to close the budget, especially over rising costs on the education side. And that's not going to get any better unless we have some substantial increase in population. So I think the bottom line is I think that I am very happy to see the movement forward. The town looks forward to working with the board to refine this concept into something that we can all be proud of. I love the new renderings, but as currently envisioned, it's an oversized building with an oversized budget. And I think we need to think carefully about how to get this back to something that a little county like ours can afford. Now, I understand the influx of cases from outside jurisdictions, but those are, Loudon and Fauquier are a lot richer, and they are welcome to build their own courthouse. So, anyway, thank you. And to borrow a phrase, I rest my case.
Sorry, excuse me. No. Madam Chairman, members of the board, and members of the Planning Oversight Committee. I'm Jean Clements, and I'm a resident of the Wakefield District. All I want to share with you tonight is my understanding of a current security issue. In our neighboring county, Fauquier, I understand that there is currently pending, I don't know the exact charges, but they are from a defendant based on the statement, I intend to kill Judge Foster. Judge Foster is not only a judge in Fauquier or Loudon, she is a judge in Rappahannock County. Who would think that such a statement or such a case or such a concern would hit Fauquier? But if it could hit Fauquier, it could hit Rappahannock County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura Grigsby, Hampton. I'm not going to belabor the courthouse. I'm in agreement. I think it's way too big. And it's going to stand out a bit like a sore thumb in a quaint little community. But what I would like to mention, and great appreciation for everything everybody's doing concerning the recent power outages and the storms and everything. But one of the things that I think is getting forgotten by REC and VDOT is that this is still a strongly agricultural community. And in an effort to return power and electricity and get the roads cleared, recently, and for us particularly, there have been down fences where there are cattle in the fields. And if they're not repaired, which is an extra burden on the landowner, who didn't create the situation, then there are going to be cows out in the road and people are going to get hurt badly. So I would encourage our partners with VDOT and REC to really take a moment when they're looking around and trying to get everything back in order on the surroundings and if they're going to impact landowners and how it's going to impact the livestock in this community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Luke, I've spoken to this board before, the other members here. I'm from Piedmont District. I've heard the arguments. They have some weight, but not persuasive. Because if you take the argument that we can't predict the future, that argument can be used to delay something indefinitely because you can never predict the future. So if you buy into that argument, then you're not going to do anything because we can't predict the future, and the next board that comes along will have the same argument presented to them. We can't predict this future. How do we know we're going to predict it? We can base it on history. I think I'm not going to bore everybody with that. I think you've studied it all in the sessions leading up to this, but I don't find that argument persuasive. This issue, and Debbie mentioned this, has been kicked around. My dad was on the board in the 70s, and I remember him talking about the need for a courthouse. They could never get, though, the necessary votes on the board to do anything. Now here we are, 2025, still haven't done anything. I mean, you've done something. I say this group has gotten further than any group before you. And so I think it is time to do something. I think if it's put off, it's only going to get to be more expensive. I do agree it's too big, needs to be sized down. Some people are not going to get what they want. You're not going to be able to satisfy everybody. You need to bring the size down and bring the cost down. I'm in total agreement with that. But I don't think this needs to be stopped dead in its tracks because we can't predict the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
I'm Diane Bruce from Piedmont District. I like the looks of the new facility. I think you did the right thing by not connecting it to this building, but creating or expecting to create a different facility. It certainly looks better than the last offer we got. I feel like it's too large, and I think this is an architectural design and feature that could be modified somehow. I do believe that security is the most serious thing, and it creates the need for a lot of space. If you look at those drawings, there are hallways everywhere, there's staircases everywhere, there are walkways everywhere. I think there are 11 bathrooms. One area has a family bathroom, a mother's bathroom, and then 2 other regular bathrooms, all in a hall across from one another. That's nice, but do we need all of that? Can they not be arranged? Can the architects not figure out some way to redo the inside so that things can be over here together and then something else over here together instead of little rooms, hallways all over the place? So I think you're doing the right thing. I hope you can bring the price down. I hope you can make it smaller. I don't know what's happened in the past 15 years since I retired, but we certainly had very little need for a second courtroom in those days. And if you needed a second one, it would have been something small. It probably would not have been another jury. But if you're building something, perhaps this is the time to build them both and it's done. Those rooms can be used for something else when they're not in use, perhaps as a, as a jury. So we need it. You're on the right path. Costs too much. I'm glad I'm not having to make this decision. And I think I counted 56 windows on just one side and the front. Beautiful windows. I don't know what's on the other side. It's not in the picture there. But thank you and good luck.
Beautiful design.
Nobody else in the courtroom? There are some folks on Zoom. Anyone wishing to speak during public comment, please raise your Zoom hand.
4 of them are on the Glavi Homes team, and 1 is our local reporter.
Well,
Doubtful then.
3 are on the Glavi.
All right, then I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And we can open it up to the board.
Maybe I'll just very quickly make sure everybody knows where we are and why we're here. I think pretty much everybody knows that the board and the Planning Oversight Committee received the concept packages from Glavi Homes on the 24th. All of the information that was shared with the board is available online, and hopefully people have taken an opportunity to review not just the rendering that was in the newspaper, but the floor plans and all the other information that is there. At that meeting, it was, I think, pretty broadly felt that it's a very expensive project. And there needed to be continued discussions about how do we bring together the concerns of cost and mass and the concerns of functionality and safety. And when the board had that conversation, the thought was that the best way to do that would be to have the practitioner stakeholders in the room, sitting at the table with the board, so that you can explain to each other the perspectives of relative value of different spaces and needs and what have you. In a hope, in a way, somehow, to provide additional direction to the architectural firm to revise the concept. I do want to speak to some of the comments that look at a floor plan and say, well, why can't you move this here and move this there? This is a concept. This is intended to give us an idea of the general size and scope of a project that fulfills the program that was developed by the interviews with all the stakeholders, with the judges, with the clerks, with the sheriff, with the Commonwealth attorney. And so this is one way to arrange all those pieces that works relative to each other. If we were to tell the consultant that we like it, let's move to the finish line, there's a lot of design left to happen, and these boxes might move around a fair amount between now and then that would change their relationship with each other and bring efficiencies. Now, alternatively, the only way to save significant dollars on a project like this is to reduce space. And so those bring with them difficult conversations about which spaces are subject to be eliminated or reduced in size. And I think those conversations are best had in this format. Maybe a little nerve-wracking with a bunch of people sitting behind you.
That's okay.
But it's important to do that. And you don't have to pose a number of questions, wait a week, get a number of answers, wait a week, and go back and forth. Some of that can be done right here. Hopefully everybody feels willing to speak openly. Mr. Moore is here from Glavi Homes to help facilitate. His team of architects and the space programming firm are online to help. And we want to facilitate and help the board and the Planning Oversight Committee, of which I'm a member, work through some of these questions and bring out some ideas and concepts. In front of you also, there's the floor plans for you to see up close. These are all online as PDFs. I thought maybe that would help people visualize what we're talking about. There's a couple emails there from folks who couldn't be here, or also submitted an email, and board members have some tax rate implication documents in front of them as well. So with that, I'll be quiet because you all are more important in this conversation than me. I think you're the leader.
I think we've heard so much from so many people about size that I'm wondering, at this point, have you looked at it and said, well, there's something, of course I could do immediately and take away 2,000 square feet. From an architectural standpoint, I have to believe you've looked at this, knowing that size was definitely an issue. What are you thinking?
So, we do take it incremental, as we're working through the design, refining it, tailoring it to the specific needs of the court system. The first pass is the program itself, right, which is simply a list of each individual space, sized appropriately, tallied up, and then giving a grossing factor that accounts for wall thicknesses and circulation that we normal. That's the 28,000 and change number that we came up with. And then there's the actual deployment on the site, which has another round of thinking that goes with it. We've got 3 levels. We've got certain adjacencies that we're trying to maintain. That's made us go back up to 30,000 plus. I am quite confident that we can shove, the building back into a 28,000 square foot envelope. So one answer to your question is that we can get, call it 10% out of the building just by refining the design. I'm confident of that. Beyond that, we're really talking about cutting program. So it's like, what do you want to cut? And some of the aspects of the building are modular. So if you cut one thing, you're actually cutting something. Other things, that are downstream from it, some are not. Right. A good example of that would be, you're going to have public restrooms in the building no matter what. You're going to have a security screening area no matter what. And the incremental size of those is somewhat linked to overall building size, but not directly. The big program chunks we talked about in our joint meeting 2 times ago. Those are the courtroom itself and the associated spaces that go along with it. The jury assembly space is a big chunk, and we have the secure parking is a big chunk of space. But the clerks' spaces are designed to program. The prisoner holding area has to be a certain size in order to have secure solid port, so forth. So there's certain fixed items that are hard to change.
Art, it might make sense, because I know you put some time thinking about areas that could be downsized. It might make sense for you to go through what you were thinking of the numbers.
Well, I did think about it a lot, about what really happens here. And primarily, it's we don't have a huge civil docket, either in the district court, I don't think, or circuit court. We do, though, there's a lot of juvenile court. And we only have that court 2 days a month, but I can foresee of all the courts growing in busyness, I think J&D is probably the one most likely. I don't foresee a huge, it's not a population thing, it's a docket thing. Page County has a population of 28,000 some odd, and a lot of the crime is local, because it's hemmed in on all sides. But here, we have people coming through. So it's conceivable we could have Page County-like dockets in the long-term future. But it seems to me the most practical thing is to focus on J&D, not only from a security standpoint, but also the likelihood of usefulness. And it's also a flex courtroom too. It can be used for civil motions as well as juvenile court. And so my suggestion and what I put in my email results in about 7,500 square feet, I think is what we came up with here, being cut out of the project.
I think there's a bunch of things.
So one thing that I really want to recommend to the board, and I don't know, Judge Palmer feel about this courtroom, this circuit courtroom is perfect in its size and configuration. The reason is something called voir dire. You bring the jury panel in and they're all lined up in these seats back here, and I can see them. I can see who's nodding off, who's smirking, who's laughing, not paying attention. And it's also easy to see their little numbers when they hold up their little numbers on who they are. okay? If you have this big, long cavernous space like they've got in this page 2 here, you're not gonna be able to see the whites of their eyes at the back of the courtroom. So, and I think that matters for the litigants, attorneys especially, and I would think the judges too, to be able to see them. Also too, it's a security issue in my mind, because if somebody's really getting into a bad fight in the back of the courtroom, it's gonna take that much longer for a bailiff to get down there and bust it up. So I suggested that we keep the courtroom, the main courtroom of the general district and circuit, exactly the dimension of this court that we're sitting in right now.
I think a jury box.
Yeah,
It needs a little space.
so obviously these 4 chairs have to go, but then in J&D, I think the courtroom itself ought to be about 20 by 20, which is roughly the Page County court size. It needs to be a small and more intimate space, and it needs to have more conference areas for the litigants. That's one of the complaints I have about Page. They only built 1 conference room. Really need 2 because there's 2 sides to every court case. So then the other suggestion that I had was to essentially that should shrink a lot of, and there's a lot of very broad corridors and a lot of wasteful space in this that can be shrunk. I do believe that the facade on the front of the thing is terrific. I like the contact visits for attorneys to visit their clients. I think that's essential. We also need these holding cells because you don't want to put female inmates in with male inmates, and more importantly, sometimes there's co-defendants that shouldn't be in the same holding cell. And sometimes there's just a flat out crazy guy that shouldn't be in with anybody.
Okay.
Or what?
Or gay.
Or what?
Or gal. Crazy guy or crazy gal.
Oh.
Crazy, whatever person.
Crazy person.
You call somebody out by name then?
I thought you were saying Gale. Gale's not crazy. I do support the elimination of the underground parking and would adopt, although it's not in my email, but I would adopt Mr. Luke's idea that a security fence that would block the vision, block view, would be tall enough and secure for judge parking and also to function as a secure outdoor sally port, for lack of a better word. All those things I think have resulted in significant space and cost savings and would let us remain somewhat flexible, especially in the excavated spaces below for future potential needs, as well as, remember, we've got this grand old building and some money could be spent here to repurpose it for the board of supervisors, but also in a pinch for court hearings. I understand that too, people like this old building and would not want to see it fall into disrepair. So I think part of your planning and part of your cost savings thinking is renovation and preservation of this building itself and continued usage of it on a regular basis. So I think we would be in a very good position at that point. We'd have tons of space to accommodate, I believe, what I would believe to be even Page County style dockets where we have 700 to 1,000 indictments or even more a year, which now, what do we have, 70, 80 here? So then, and allow for the juvenile court to have its necessary security and space to conduct its business, the combined district and juvenile courts, which should be within the envelope as well as the circuit court, because main thing is everybody coming in from the public should have to enter through security, whether they're going to the records room or they're going to pay their fine. Those people can pose potential danger as well. So I think whatever the figure was, Gary, that we came up with.
Yeah, I can pull it up. Inherent in what you said, with the second smaller courtroom being JDR, you're speaking that being a hearing room, not a jury-capable room.
That's
we
correct.
talked about that, which means you would be shedding the dependent jury deliberation suite. And you also said the jury assembly room, which is separate on the concept, could be co-located, or the jury deliberation room for the main courtroom could serve as the jury assembly room if the building were configured in a way to allow that, combining the two rooms, making a large jury deliberation room, because you need to house all the folks who come to assemble, but the two would never be used for the same purpose at the same time. They need to be, because there's only one jury capable court.
There's only one jury, so the way it works over there in Page is they come in, that's their assembly room, then they go back out and deliberate in that same room. So it just seems to me somewhat duplicative to have, not that it's a great big deal of space, but still nonetheless, especially when you're talking two jury capables, you got one assembly room, but two deliberation rooms. And I honestly can't see that. I think you'd be eating a lot of space for a long time with nobody in those rooms. That's just my humble opinion. I stand corrected on any point I've made, but I thought that the total savings was pretty significant.
Yeah, and that included the basement stuff. So I think an important,
Thank you.
trying to facilitate in some way, an important point to consider is the second courtroom and the need for it to be jury capable. Is that something that is a need today or foreseen? And what is the consequence of proceeding without that and having, as Art describes, a smaller intimate room that is really focused and hits the sweet spot for juvenile and domestic relations court, where there is no gallery, it's, one case at a time. I think that's important for everybody to think about, discuss, and try to understand where you want to go.
We should hear from our judges.
Yep.
And Jane, you would.
Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead, Paige.
No.
I just had a comment about the courtroom thing that Eric was talking about. I did hear from some members of the public, and maybe some of you were thinking about the possibility of planning for a future addition of a courtroom. That's possible, but it's difficult. And the reason it's difficult is because of those separated circulation pathways that are so critical to a courtroom's function. Getting it so you can have prisoners, judges, and public all be in separate, segregated populations. When you add an addition, you're inevitably cutting off one of the paths that you have before.
Well, I just kind of want to take 2 steps back and say, is it true that it's too big? It seems too big to us because we've got this building, and that's what we're comparing it to. But we've got this building plus the clerk's office that we're going to combine into one space. So is it too big compared to what other same-sized jurisdictions have in their counties? Because I guess Caitlin looked at some numbers for us on some other counties and whether or not they have 2 courtrooms. And she's got Bland County at 7,378 people with 2 courtrooms. King and Queen County with 5,244 people with 2 courtrooms. Cumberland at 3,985 people, 2 courtrooms. Richmond County, 3,777, and Bath at 3,518. So it's much smaller than Rappahannock, and they've got 2 courtrooms. We're talking about three separate courts running at the same time, and how big are the other courthouses that people have built recently? Because one thing that causes a lot of space need is ADA compliance. You've got to have elevators, you've got to have ramps, you've got to have accessibility that we don't have at all now. I mean, our chairlift is just really difficult to use. So I hear what people are saying, it seems too big, but I think we should at least ask, is that the truth or is that the way it seems, because it's so much bigger than what we've got now. And I wish I had gotten this together for you before today, but I'm happy to work on it to find out what are the square footage of these other courthouses that have 2 courtrooms in these other counties that are much smaller than Rappahannock. Because it might be that we just need to have more conversations within the community to say, it's not too big, this is what we need. And yes, we can cut some space by making it not very capable, but the whole idea of talking about that to begin with was so that it is going to last longer. We're talking about 5 years or 10 years from now needing more space, but that's not reasonable at all. 75 years, okay, maybe that's something that's more reasonable. So before we say we all agree it's too big and where can we cut, I think we should at least have some discussion about, is it too big? Or is it something that we're all just gonna have to take some time to get used to? That this is what a functional modern courthouse is gonna be, and how can we make it the best that we can to fit into our community. But as far as the courtroom, the J&D courtroom can be much smaller, that's not an issue. I don't know about 20 by 20, that's pretty tiny. I think in Fauquier I've got a 600 square foot courtroom. The only thing you have to think about is that, especially in foster care cases, you got 3 parties. You got a dad and an attorney, a mom and an attorney, and the Department of Social Services and an attorney. Sometimes you got more than one dad or more than one mom. So then you're talking about, in the courtroom in Fauquier, I've got 2 tables, and anybody else who's not capable of fitting in those 2 tables has to sit in the gallery. It's not really ideal for some parties to be treated differently than other parties, so it can be much smaller. I think 20 by 20 is definitely pushing it. I think it needs to be a little bigger than that, but smaller is fine.
Thank you. And thanks for, Caitlin, if you pulled that together, thank you very much.
I have 2 questions. Thank you, Judge Cup. Do you know if those 2 courtrooms that you did research on, were they jury-capable courtrooms, both of them? Do you know if they were, do you know the
I do not know
composition?
that.
Okay.
I wasn't able to get that information.
Thank you for doing that, though. That's
Yeah.
really instructive.
Matthews they just rebuilt theirs, because I was in the county next to them, around 2015 or so.
You're saying they built theirs?
They built theirs around 2015. Before that, they were something like this. But they're a nice flat area, no slope, it's all on one floor. Our site has some challenges.
Well, the other thing that I think that Judge Cup was just saying, which is that this is going to be expensive, but we have a responsibility to do this for our citizens. This is part of what government is providing this, which is justice for our citizens. If we're telling our citizens, hey, we don't really want to give you guys what we really should be giving you because we just don't want to pay for it, that right now, that's the situation that we're in, because this building is just not safe. And I think that we have to get to that point where, we just realize what is the right size, because my constituents that talk to me are just like, this is way too big, I can't deal with this. This is just way, way, way too big. But we have a responsibility to allow people to come in, feel safe, and have justice done. I mean, that is literally what we're talking about. And I think the tough part is going to be communicating how incredibly expensive things have gotten and how tough it is to build these days on any reasonable level. And my fear, and I brought this up at the last meeting, was that we can project at what we think it's going to cost now, but we're not there. We don't even know. And that was where I basically left at the last minute or the last meeting, was that who knows where we're going to be in 2 years. But I think resoundingly what I'm hearing from everybody is that we need, well, I heard you say that we can get at least 10% down just by doing some things. I'm not sure if we take out and just have secure parking, if that gets us to a place where it's, instead of having the underground parking, if that gets us to some reduced, it's the same footprint, but
Yeah, I mean, it's
pretty cheap space.
it's cheap space. But if we can do that, and if we can shrink the courtrooms and we don't need them as big, can we reasonably shave 20% off of these and shrink and start doing this thing where we can get it down? You said 28, but can we get it down to 26, 24?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So the question on the courtrooms is a matter of somewhat of a modularity. There's a fixed size for the well itself that is, it's always got nice stuff. Right? It's the distance from the bar to the judge's bench, the width of the bench, how big a ADA accessible jury box is, what's a suitable space size for the litigants' tables. That's all that is coded in. And then it's just a math of how many people you have a seat, right? And right now we've designed the larger courtroom to seat 40 people, 40 spectators, right? So at a certain moment, it just becomes how many people do you think you want to reasonably fit into your courtroom? using the metrics. And I hear what Art says about the size of the courtroom, but that's actually the size it needs to be to make those numbers work.
Did you say the big courtroom only seats 40?
I think that's right.
Because that wouldn't accommodate your need at all, Mr. Goff. You need 80 at least.
It's gotta be
And
more.
traffic court needs at least 80.
This room's
It's not-
1,200 square feet, and the courtroom is
And the big
shown
courtroom
is
on here is
1960.
1960. So that,
But the well and all the stuff you just explained, jury box for sure is going to be a little bit different.
so that's
Can
not,
the folks
it's not
online
a huge
speak?
increase.
Yes.
Stacy, can you verify the capacity of the larger courtroom?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Really well.
Yes.
Okay. So we did program it for the 40 spectators. So it's just a matter of how the courtroom layout fits out. And I would say another factor to what you were describing, Andrew, is the structural bay. That also establishes the width of the courtroom as well.
Just the structure of the building, having a free span with,
Yes.
columns in the middle.
But we did program the large courtroom for 40 spectators.
And just out of curiosity, what was the smaller one?
Well, the smaller one for the JNDR, we did not list spectators in our listing because it's more about the well configuration at that point. I'm sure we'd have a row or two of seating in the back.
And again, so we're in concept, and all of that, by the time you're in detailed design, you'll know exactly how many rows and what the benches will look like, what they're made out of, and
We'll have furniture in the,
Yeah.
the plans.
yeah. But we need to get through this stage to get to that stage.
Well, what does getting to this stage look like? What do we need to do to move this forward so that we can start?
I can answer that.
Yes.
I mean, what we need is a program directive from this body. What we want to be in this courtroom, or in this courthouse. There's clerk space, two clerks, there's touchdown space for the Commonwealth Attorney, there's the two courtrooms, currently both jury capable. There's a jury assembly space, which is necessary. We decided last time, if you're gonna have two jury capable courtrooms, there's little point in not having it, because not having it means you can't hold two jury court sessions at the same time. And then there's the secure parking. Those are the big nuts, in this program. The big rocks that are the ones that you have to sell first. The other stuff fits around it, right?
Judge Plowman, I've been looking at it.
Careful what you ask.
No, but I mean, you, 2 meetings ago, you really, you took some leadership on the idea of 2 courtrooms and parallel jury space, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get your reaction, given all the public comment and some of those.
So my first thought, as far as do we have 1 courtroom or 2 courtrooms, and I heard much of the comments of, do we need 2 courtrooms for the courts? We have to remember, it's not 1 court, it's not 2 courts, there are 3 courts using the space. The circuit court, the juvenile and domestic relations court, and the general district court. So it's 3 separate courts. So if you want to maximize your flexibility, what I would tell you now is, I think you need 2 courtrooms today. So we've talked a lot about looking into the future, planning for the future, trying to have a vision for down the road. In my opinion, you need 2 courtrooms now. Because the circuit court, and I agree, our dockets are not always heavy, although I have been in here on a criminal docket where it's not full, but I'll tell you it's uncomfortably full. Because I'll have 6 or 7 inmates sitting here, members of the public, they don't want to sit right behind them, and the security doesn't either. You have reporters, you have probation officers, defense attorneys, other litigants. It's uncomfortably full knowing that there's only one way out. And all these people, whether they be
members of a potential jury panel or an inmate or an attorney or me. We've got to go out the same way. So in my opinion, you need 2 courtrooms today. So what I was getting at is we have essentially 3 dockets a month, and we have 2 jury days, Caitlin, is it? And then
We have 2 overflow days that could be used for juries or
right,
all-day
a
trials.
couple days that are in if break glass in case of an emergency, we use these days. But it's, I have to share, we have to share our circuit court days with the general district court, with the juvenile court. We can't operate it here in the same day. It's not like I can have a morning docket and they have an afternoon docket on the same day, because you never tell. All it takes is one case and the docket blows up. So 1 courtroom versus 2 courtrooms, we're already past that, in my opinion.
And I think Caitlin mentioned before, if you're to have a preliminary hearing, I don't know what order things happen, but you have to set something for a jury trial, or any trial, a trial, you have to need 2 days. When is that happening if you decide today that has, because it's used so many, for a lot of different uses, you're months and months and months out.
We're booked up through August currently.
Yeah. We said, we're basically setting only one trial a month. It could be a jury trial, it could be a 2-day bench trial. But we're setting one a month, and once we approach that, and if, let's say, it settles, we can't really backfill, because if you're too close to the day, there's not enough time to get discovery done, I can't prepare, my calendar's full. So it just gets pushed out. So that's a disservice to the residents and the litigants that want to resolve their disputes. That we don't want people waiting a year. Another comment I heard dealt with the caseloads. Counting the caseloads, and we have this many cases and this many case filings. I will tell you from my own personal investigation over the last several months, those numbers are wholly unreliable, at least the circuit court numbers are, in my opinion again. And I'll tell you why, it's because every county has an elected clerk of court, like Caitlin. And our investigation, because we're trying to get more circuit court judges. We've already made our pitch, they recognize the need, they're not funding it, that's a whole separate issue. But one of the things that I say they, the Supreme Court and the committees that make these decisions, the General Assembly, they have funded a study from the National Center for State Courts that looks at case filing numbers and puts different weights on different types of cases and says, your circuit needs X number of judges. And the General Assembly relies on that in appointing judges or creating positions. But what no one has ever pointed out, and we've done a lot of digging into this, is that every circuit court clerk counts cases a little bit differently. This clerk may assign a case number to this case and this one doesn't. This Commonwealth's attorney may only indict the cases he's going forward on. This Commonwealth attorney will indict 30 cases, even if they're only pleading to 2, and will drop the other 28, but they get credit for 30 felony cases. So there are ways that these numbers get inflated. The whole reports rely on that, and it's bad data in, bad data out. They tell us that our circuit needs 3.95 judges, and we have 5. We already have more, and I'll tell you, and in our circuit, since 1998, we've added 1 judge, 1 circuit court judge in 2015. That was Judge Fleming. Our county has grown, during that same period of time, 310,000 people. Mostly in Loudoun, obviously, but can you tell me that we need 1 judge for every 300,000 people? No. And we're the per capita, we're the worst funded, worst allocated. We have the fewest number of judges per capita in the entire state. So the numbers are wrong, so I wouldn't wholly rely on those. The other thing is, if you look back 10 years, well, you need to look back 30 or 40 years, because you've had the need, as Mr. Luke said, they started looking at this back in the 70s. So arguably, you've had the need for 50 years. So I don't know that, I wouldn't put a lot of stock in case filing. It's more accurate with the district court, I believe, because they have certain standards and guidelines they go by, and their cases are a little more accurate. Circuit court, you've got independently elected constitutional officers in every county, and they all do it a little bit differently. Where was I going with this?
No, well,
So you started me, and I don't remember where to stop. That's the problem.
I mean,
He put the quarter in the jukebox.
Yeah,
I
he
saw him
did.
do
Because
it.
when I think two courtrooms, I will always remember it started with you, but with a very credible argument in that regard, and I think it's important for people to hear that
So
from a judge.
the other thing with the two courtrooms, and I've done Art's job before. I was Commonwealth attorney for 16 years in Loudon. I was an assistant in Fairfax for a while. Before that, I did a lot of court-appointed work in juvenile court. 20 by 20 is really, really tight. I mean, that is, I think it's grossly undersized.
You're probably right, Joe.
But
Smart answer.
I didn't.
he won't be in front of me for a while. But it's the other thing you do is you pigeonhole that second courtroom into being only for juvenile court. Because Judge Foster couldn't use that, anything that size. We have a courtroom in Loudon that is probably 3 or 4 times this size, and I've had, because there's only one like that, and it was a multi-code offended criminal case. There wasn't any issue seeing the whites of their eyes. And I was the furthest one away. So I'm not saying you need one 4 times this size. I'm certainly not saying that. But I think a little bit more elbow room than this is necessary. But you don't want that second one to be so restrictive. And frankly, there's actually one in Loudon that I love sitting in. It's a small hearing room that is probably 30 by 40. And we do small hearings in there on occasion. It's great for mediation. And I've used that before, but it just depends on the type of case. So, but I think if you want flexibility, you can't have that second courtroom that small. Because if it's just normal size, then both district courts could use it, the circuit court could use it. If there's a big traffic docket, then they could move them into the bigger. It lets us go back and forth, rather than, well, you're over here and we're all over here, and don't cross the lines. You want to be able to use both for whatever purpose you have.
And I think the directive to Glavian Homes from the meeting where these two groups came together was designed for flexibility in the future to satisfy that need. And the question on the table is that still the directive? Recognizing there's a conflict between cost, mass, and functionality.
Judge Foster, what do you?
How big is this courtroom square footage? Where was it?
I think it's 1,200. Just
1,200. So if you had a mirror, a flip, double image, you think that is sufficient? Two of them this size here, is that gonna?
I don't even think you need that. I mean, even 50% larger than this would probably be, well, that's what you have on there, right?
Yeah.
About
So the small
50%
one in the
larger.
concept is about this size.
The small?
Yeah.
So
Right now, yeah.
So if the hard choices are to cut space, then that's kind of what the board has to decide, right? Is how big are these courtrooms going to be? So the architects can go ahead and do what they got to do.
Well, the size of the courtroom is gonna, obviously can cut space. The decision of whether they're both jury capable. If they're not, you lose a jury deliberation room, the dependent bathrooms, the secure corridor, all that ties together, you lose that.
I could see that before I see shrinking it down to
Yeah.
something and restricting your flexibility.
And if you go to one jury-capable courtroom, I think it brings in your concept of, well, then the jury assembly room and the jury deliberation room can then serve a dual purpose. because you won't ever need the jury assembly room and the jury deliberation room for their independent needs at the same time. If you opt out of a second jury-capable courtroom, and that's a threshold question for, you know, the stakeholders and the board to think about as directive to the architect for the next iteration.
And Andrew also said though that there are, I believe, Supreme Court guidelines on distances within a room, so we can't just willy-nilly shrink if we're losing track of what's required in terms of separation and the size of the bench.
Yeah, it's the well, you know, those are fixed dimensions, and then it's a math on this numbers spectrum if you want.
What is the most expensive square foot cost in courthouse? Is it the correctional, the holding cells, or is it the courtroom?
Probably somewhere in there. Yeah, it's one or the other.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's one thing to look at the size and the cost, which is, of course, the first thing anyone sees or looks at, but you can't really compare this to a high school. You can't compare it to office or retail space. You basically have 3 buildings in one because of the traffic that's required to be separate. And even separation within the holding cells, because if you have juveniles and adults in there, they've got to be separated by sight and sound, I believe, by DOC guidelines. You can't have any contact there at all. So it's essentially traffic of 3 buildings in one.
And you do have, we have an office building, right, for the clerks, and we have a jail, and we have a place for a judge to sit and decide, you know, who should pay the fine and the clerk and who should.
Judge Foster, what do you think from a district court perspective?
From the district court perspective, I'm not really gonna weigh in on whether or not the second jury room should be jury capable or not. In my opinion, it probably would be okay if it was not jury capable, but I would be concerned in reducing the big courtroom space any smaller than the 1960 that's here on the rendering, because we're at 1,200 now, and we have to accommodate for a real jury box and all of that space that would take up. And if this is only a 40 person gallery, I think that might be a little, actually on the small side, for a traffic docket. Because a traffic docket can draw, it really depends on the officer a lot of times, how many people are coming to court. We can have a packed courtroom, or we can have an empty courtroom, and there's no way of telling. But when we do have a packed courtroom and we can't fit everybody in the courtroom, or if there are too many in the courtroom, like Judge Common was saying, it becomes very uncomfortable when we're packing here too tightly. And then we have to start segregating downstairs. No family members allowed, no moral support, only defendants can come into the courtroom. Otherwise, I have to split the docket, and then everything takes a lot longer. And people don't want to be in court for a long time, especially in traffic docket. They take in the morning off, they need to get back to work. So we try and be really efficient and try and get people out of here. So I need everybody here in the courtroom when I do the call of the docket.
One of the solutions to, if people are concerned about the massing, is you build 2 smaller buildings. But it would be wildly inefficient, I would think. But that I would prefer that to be actually.
We end up duplicating a lot of things.
Yeah.
Or giving up something in one or the other. Like, we're working on the assumption that you need to have in-custody facilities in both.
Yeah.
And now you're doubling up on your salad court, holding cells, circulation. Just.
And so the hill helps us with the massing of the structure. From the front, it doesn't look as bad, and I think the renderings show that out. And from the rear, it would look tall. No different than the earlier concepts that the board saw from the last iteration of going through this. You're 3 stories in the back, and
I think
just because the hill falls away, and that's just the nature of the site. It's a huge benefit in some ways, and it makes it a little complex in others.
I have to say, I think it looks a lot different than the last iteration. And I think
the height, I'm sorry.
And I think Andrew has heard it, and it should be reinforced that it seems almost without exception that most people agree that what you and your team have come up with is really an attractive building, and it fits Rappahannock County. And for people to react immediately to a concept like that in such a uniform way really at least caught me off guard, but was also very good news, because I think we got stuck last time just because the concept did not land well with the public. So you should be applauded for doing good work in this regard.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we've come to any conclusion on the courtroom space. I think it would be great if we could push through to a conclusion on the courtroom space. It seems like I haven't heard any discussion here that would suggest that one courtroom is an appropriate path forward.
But I have heard that we could do 2 courtrooms without the second jury deliberation.
Right.
And that would be helpful, and that you could shave off 10%.
That was you.
That
He
is
just-
in the news.
John and Ann are thinking right now, how am I going to get 10%?
Yeah, I mean, just to do quick math, right, it's about 500 square feet-ish for a jury deliberation suite. 500 square feet. So you can take that out.
That's office space.
And below.
Yeah.
You could,
Well,
But-
in this current concept,
Yeah.
it's just on one level, right? So we have to reconfigure things in order to make the building
totally.
work.
But the 500 below it was that, I'm not gonna say filler, because nothing here is filler.
Yeah.
But can that be gone as well?
Well, the lowest level,
Storage building.
lowest right now is basement. So
That's
part of it
big.
is unexcavated basement or shell basement.
That's right.
And so all that bottom floor can be reconfigured however
So,
it seems fit.
yeah, I was,
So the building is, I think, 11,275 square feet per floor, about, right now. That's what it is.
Right.
And so the basement is some portion of that is not needed, could be excavated or not. And so that's what this concept is. And then if you can shrink the envelope, you've got to do it in a way that you can shrink it on both floors. Because you've got the clerks on one floor with, various things, and then you get the courtrooms on the second floor. So we say, we're just gonna shrink the courtrooms by 50%, but then you have to shrink the clerk's office by 50%, and that's not doable. So then we're back to, do we do both courtrooms on the same floor?
If you take all the square
calculus.
footage out from the lower level, it basically doesn't change anything as far as the appearance of that, does it? It still looks the same.
Yeah, more. I mean, I guess
You may reduce the cost a little bit, but.
it maybe not be really useful to think in terms of the consequences of taking space out for other space. It's really useful to me for you to give us license or directive to say, 2 courtrooms, both of them are true courtrooms, so we're not talking about the courtroom and the hearing room. So, there's a well, right? But one of them's not jury capable, so maybe the well's a little smaller because it doesn't need a jury box. And we want to eliminate the jury deliberation suite. That's
And the jury assembly.
Yeah, and then we can talk about the dual purpose room that Art was alluding to, about whether that makes sense or not. We could probably make that work. So that's sort of valuable information that we hope to get.
Andrew and his team are gonna throw all this back up and have it land on the paper a different way.
Yeah, the concept will not come back to you with just white out. On the spaces, right?
We would think as well.
Even if you took one off as not being jury capable, you still need a jury assembly area.
Well, the jury assembly could then double as the jury deliberation room for the primary courtroom. It could be one in the same
So
room.
it'd have to be a little bit.
It'd
have to hold.
It would be a big jury deliberation room.
Oversized deliberation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it functionally works because you never have 2 jury trials going at the same time.
Right.
And laying it out becomes a good exercise for Andrew and his team. But it gets complicated people need to be able to get there from the public side and the secure side and the courtroom.
Andrew,
Or should be able to.
the former mayor, Mr. Sullivan, mentioned a number that I just want to check in terms of keeping the big picture in mind. Mr. Sullivan mentioned that you're talking about something that would be 8 times the footprint of this building. Is that correct?
I I think this was 5,000 square feet, is that right? Ish, so.
Okay, not quite. Six, yeah. It was a shocking number, and because I love you, I wanted to, I believe you, but I also wanted to check.
I will not claim that every number I said. Precisely.
Andrew, if we're not focused on the courtrooms at the moment, are there areas, I mean, it's a heck of a nice entrance, and there's nice bathrooms and nice everything. Is there anything that we're missing that we could kind of downsize that don't touch court?
There are certainly ways to make it less commodious, right? I mean, we've built in reasonable circulation spaces that we feel like are appropriate for the number of people. In some ways, those are professional judgment. Put a gun in my head and say, make it smaller, it's going to be smaller.
I won't do that.
No, but put again.
No, but I do want to reiterate that there is a whole nother rigorous exercise we will go through to make this as efficient as possible. And that's why I'm confident in saying that we can do 10% out of the building. The guidelines, by the way, my colleague texted me that the facility guidelines also have a metric on a per courtroom basis. Within the guidelines, just give you kind of a rule of thumb. And the range is between 13,000 and 16,000 per courtroom. Right? So if you're talking about a 2-courtroom courthouse, it should be somewhere between 26,000 and 32,000. Right? That's and we're right at, the program's saying 28. So we're right in the middle of that, but it does suggest that there's a little bit, you can shave it off down lower to be more efficient across things.
And your reduction overview, am I correct that you landed somewhere around 21,000 square feet? And based on square foot cost, something like we're well below $20 million.
Assuming that the 600 square foot is accurate.
Ours was around 22,000. That included eliminating the indoor parking and shrinking some other things in the basement.
And taking away the 2 assembly rooms and the 2 deliberation rooms and coming down to 1 assembly room.
But possibly a second courtroom that may be smaller than other people are trying.
I put out 20 by 20 because that's what it looked like to me.
You negotiated?
My living room is 20 by 22. I was like, yeah, that's about right.
So, but assuming 800, yeah.
You've been in it, you saw how big it was.
But let's say $800 a square foot, and you're talking, so I could see where you're running up. It was close to between 16 and $18 million.
So that's a very important point, and significant portion of the square footage that is reduced in that idea is parking space in the basement, and so when you eliminate that, this is no longer going to be $702 a square foot. Is going to be, averaged up because you're getting rid of the cheap seats, and it's then going to be $800 a square foot for what's left over. The total will drop, but it's not a proportionate on the square footage.
Yeah, but
it's still
John's point is,
absolutely.
But to John's point, just think about the interest. So just any penny we can save now, and I'm not just trying to be pedantic about this, it is meaningful. And I know that we're going through this process and it's tough. It is really expensive.
That's necessary.
And it is totally necessary.
My point was simply, don't expect that you're going to shave a third of the square footage and a third of the cost.
I get that.
Right, because what we figured out was if we're doing this, we're thinking 6.6 to 7.2 on the pennies on increase. And for a $500,000 property, that was going to raise it by $352. More or less per taxpayer with a $500,000 property. So that's what I guess this is all about, is that everybody out here has got to know that.
I told my wife on the way out the door, she's like, how much more would it cost us per year? I said, $40 a month. She said, that's a lot. I said, I know. Period. It's a lot. And Joe said it, and others have said it. It's real money.
But it is the cost of civilization, as lots of people have pointed out, that,
we're not as civilized as Loudoun County. And we like it that way. But, I mean, this is Rappahannock County, and change is slow and incremental, and I think it's been awesome having a perspective of 3 esteemed judges who are talking about their real day-to-day work, and you two, Art and Caitlin, how the docket works, how you operate, how you work in a space, and so then the tension.
And Donna Foster.
Yeah, oh yeah, she had great comments. She's not here tonight, Donna Foster, the General District Court Clerk. So the tension is obvious. It's like, how do we make sure that you all are safe and you can do your jobs comfortably and efficiently, and people in the county can afford it. So that's obvious.
And it's not just so we can do our job safe, it's that if you are a victim of crime, can we ensure that you will be safe when
Fair
you come
enough.
to court and testify against the perpetrators?
Fair enough,
You
and
know, it's-
well said.
And to your point, how lucky we are to have these experts speaking to this. I only have one story to share, really. The Skilled Trades building at Laurel Ridge is a brand new building. And we did not have, the program managers did not have subject matter experts helping us. It is an 8,000 square foot building. It cost $5 million, and we had outgrown it before we had the ribbon cutting. And now the school is working on 3 additional capital improvement projects to house new programs. So I just thank you so much, because you are living it, and I think we need to listen to it.
I just wanted to talk about a little bit the facade of the building. I had someone compliment over the weekend how appealing that it was. I don't disagree. I do think that one of the knocks about the old courthouse design that we previously had on the table was that it was kind of cookie cutter, and I've seen this facade on some of the other designs that you've done, and I have to say the design concept versus the actual photographs of installations later is maybe not as seamless as the renderings would have you believe it will be. I wonder if there's a way to save some money on the front of the building. To quote someone that lives in my district who sat in this courtroom and commented many times about the courthouse design, we have a very modest facade on this building because Rappahannock is a poor rural county. We couldn't afford a grand facade on our courthouse. And while it would certainly be nice to have columns, I just wonder, columns and arches, is there a way to reduce the cost by simplifying the facade, still having it be appealing, which I understand was the major knock of the first go at the courthouse design, but not necessarily just like this.
Is there a question?
Can it be redesigned to save some money?
Well, the front porch could be gone.
I mean.
Is that gonna save you money then?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever that costs.
Well, I just want to say,
It's not the other buildings, though. It's the same,
I mean,
Jefferson.
you're our client, right? And we'll respond to the comments that we've gotten. Our opinion, if you want to ask me, is that this should be a civic building that the county wants to develop, right? And it can be any number of forms. We've chosen for this particular form, a Jeffersonian approach that was recognizable throughout the Commonwealth for how courthouses are designed. If you want to call it cookie cutter, call it classical revival, whatever you want to call it. It is a well-respected way of approaching a civic building. Can it be changed? Certainly. We can try different options, and I would say that as we develop our schematic design for whatever concept you want to move forward with, if our directive from our client is to study other options, we can certainly do that.
I mean, I want to be proud of it, but I also want to have something that people can get behind and that we can finance.
This is an exercise in compromise, is what this is going to turn out to be. Everybody's not going to get what they want. And, you know, we'll have to compromise on the square footage. We'll need to compromise on the common spaces. I think there's certainly common spaces that can be combined for cost efficiencies. I know I mentioned that previously when we sat down and met the first time before these designs were rendered. I mean, I echo the concerns of Diane Bruce. I don't see any reason for all those bathrooms. And honestly, I sat here and listened to the idea that an addition can't be made on a courthouse building, and we just spent, I would say, probably half of the budget of this $200,000 design concept to see if we could put an addition on our historic courthouse.
I think it's.
But we've been told that we can't do it on a new courthouse.
My reference was to add a court engine to a courthouse.
Yeah, which is basically what, I mean, we can parse it out however you like. But I just think that this is going to be an exercise in compromise, and everybody will have to come to the table to get what they want. If we're going to get this across the finish line, nobody's going to get everything they want.
Well, I just want to say that, because I haven't said this yet, which is that the only thing I've heard about the facade is that people love it. And that's the one thing that I think is the strongest thing about it. So I want to disagree with you here. And I think that space that you guys have created is fantastic. I have no idea how much it costs. Hopefully it doesn't cost a whole lot. But I've heard a lot of good feedback about the public space that it creates. And in a town that has a different feeling than when I grew up here, and there are definitely less kids on bikes riding around, I think something like that is a good thing. You know, it flows well for me. But I mean, so I disagree.
I'll tell you, it's a two-part comment from that individual who I talked to on Saturday. One is that he said he loved the way it looked. I said, well, it's ballooned to almost 30,000 square feet. He said, oh, that's a problem. So that's the heart of the matter. That's where we are.
I do think if you just say to someone, oh, it's ballooned to 30,000 square feet, of course they're going to go, oh my God. But when you talk to them and you show them the rooms and what is being required and what the ADA needs and whatever, all the building zoning, everything is needed in this building, I think people still will see that it's a lot of building, but it's necessary. There's not fluff. And that's, I think, where we are is, you know, we've got to also educate everyone, like the person that spoke at the school board and said, we got to educate our citizenry as well as to what we're trying to do and why.
I just know when we did the massing on site for a 20,000 square foot building, it was not well received.
I think that was an issue of the design, it being stuck out back. And this is properly on Courthouse Row, and it's attractive.
Yeah, and so.
I mean, I guess that brings up my other question, which is where is everyone going to park and what's the plan for the rest of the complex? Because we don't really see any of that in these designs, and those are necessary functions of the court as well.
That's correct, and that's next stage.
I do wonder, is the steeple on this building
No,
the
that's
same
the last
height
thing
as
I
the
want.
steeple on this building?
Pardon me?
Is the steeple
The cupola?
height, yep, is it
It's
the
close.
same?
Close.
So from the street, you're not going to really be able to tell, that's all.
It's about the same. I mean, I don't have an exact measurement for you, but.
That was
And there's another one on
That
the
was just
church
a
down
place
there.
filler, that design was just
Yeah.
a place filler that you haven't finished out yet.
There's more to talk about on the cupola.
Yeah.
You know, what forms it take. One of my colleagues, actually Doug Hornsberger, who's working for the county, suggested we should look at a clock up there. It's being something that is not currently on the courthouse green.
Cool.
What about ringing the bell on turn day? Does that mean the bailiff has to come back over here?
So, Mike, I guess for actionable things, we can sort of move this down the field a little bit. I feel like we're getting to a place where we can get it down a little smaller, but still functional and looking towards the future. And I don't know how much square footage that would, and I told you this at the first meeting, I mean, my thing for the public is cost and size. That's just what people are focused on. And and I hate to just keep throwing that out there, but I feel like if we do the things that we've all, Art brought up, which is that bring the jury deliberation room out and then take out the golden 10% you've been talking about, and maybe some other things that you guys find in the closet.
Well, I do
And
want to,
shift.
I want to circle back to the secure parking. Just get some firm direction from the board about how we should treat that. Because that's a significant, it's not just the size, it's the fact that the building configuration being a walkout basement design lends itself to, but if you say, and again, it's quote unquote cheap space, but it's not free space.
No.
Right, so there's a cost to it, and there's also an implication for the judges about, how, we can do a secured yard with a fence around it that's opaque, but it's not as secure as being driving into the building. So just want to put that on the table for discussion because it is a big number.
Well, would the secure parking be one of those things where not everybody who needs the secure parking gets it, and we need to have some kind of space outside anyway? Is that something?
The site plan contemplates the parking in the building for the judges and parking outside the building for key staff.
Right.
But the judges would be exclusively parking in secure
Yes.
parking?
Yes.
But if you're talking about not using the secure parking, are you also talking about not doing the inside sally port?
No, it's going to be an inside sally port, one way or another. Whether it's tacked onto the back of a multi-story building, tucked underneath a multi-story building.
So it's not gonna be at Sally Port?
It's not going to be a walk through the parking lot in handcuffs.
Well,
But unless that's what the board directs, in which case it would be against my recommendation.
But I hear your question, which is that if we can give you an answer on that, then it can help you move forward.
It's
You need to
pretty
know.
critical.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you say, keep it in, then I know what to do. If you say, take it out, I know what to do. If you don't say anything, I don't know what to do.
Judges, how do you all feel?
I think we just let you go.
Well, I mean, they park on the street in Fauquier. I park in Fauquier in an open air parking lot that we've had other judges approached. Judge Parker specifically was confronted by a disgruntled father in a domestic relations case, which are frankly more volatile than the criminal cases. It can be uncomfortable.
But a fenced compound with some sort of automated gate that requires credentials to get in and out of.
Yeah, I mean, if there's some sort of physical barrier, I think that adds to the comfort level. That I know that just someone walking up off the street can't walk up to my car. I mean, even when I was almost attorney, I had stuff put on my car because they unfortunately had a sign where I spot was that said almost attorney, which I quickly changed to, parking spot 42.
Reserved for.
But yes, all sorts of.
Right, so
gifts.
remember in the concept, there was an added cost if the board wanted to excavate the area in the basement, this unfinished area, which is, over in that whole area, right? That was $150 a square foot estimated. And so if you didn't have the secure parking, then the portion that's unexcavated in the basement would grow, and the mechanical room would have to slide around. But you would still always have that opportunity to have unfinished basement or have basically no basement in that area or unfinished basement that is available for some future use way down the line at a cost. And it sounds, everything I'm hearing is that you don't want to pay today for opportunity tomorrow. So that's another critical decision. Do you want to pay for empty shell space that will be available for your purposes in the future? I think it was $518,000, if I recall correctly, to do that.
The secure parking.
No, the unfinished. So which is the same comment for secure parking. If it's not a parking area, it's it's going to be full of dirt, and it's going to be slab on grade, and part of the building is going to be slab on grade, and the other part's going to be a basement. And my advice would be where those two areas combine is mechanical space that is never going to be occupied by finished space because you have an underground basement wall that you will never excavate ever again because it's covered by a courthouse. So you need to be able to expect that it's going to leak eventually. Then,
When that.
So my concern with the outside parking area fenced in is we are spending a lot of money on a building that is going to be attractive, and I think the neighbors would probably much prefer that they hide underground than have a ugly fence by this brand new building.
we might have
point.
Good. That's just my thought. If we're gonna security, safety, and, you know, the neighbor that lives on the other side of where we're building, staring at an ugly fence. I know we brought that up probably 2 years ago, trying to make sure that the outside looked nice for the community walking around it.
I mean, I think, I don't want to speak for my colleagues on the bench, but I think we're all obviously in favor of the secured parking, underground parking. We all currently also experience much, much less security than even a fenced-in area. So, but I think, you know, as far as best practices go, the secured underground parking is the better practice.
It is hard to answer that question because it sounds like we're selfishly advocating for ourselves, for our own hides.
when this came up during the joint meeting, when you discussed the program, it makes sense if it makes sense for the building and this slope and this site and everything. And so I think it would be valuable for there, at minimum, to be an exercise with Downey and Scott to say, what is the projected cost, A, B?
Yeah, that was my question, because.
What are we paying for this privilege?
Because the Sally Port, I believe that's the term now, I think I understand. The Sally Port's gonna happen either way. So now we're talking about underground parking, and frankly, I don't see it as you self-advocate. I mean, you're coming at this from direct experience, and it's no joke. I mean, we're not even judges. Anybody in the public nowadays gets harassed, and it's not okay. So my question would be, can you disaggregate the total cost of that subterranean space and at least isolate for us, I guess is where you're going, the cost savings of saying no underground secure parking or the cost savings with? And we just look at that in isolation, we make a judgment, but I don't think it's not really a space, it's a space issue, it's a cost issue, because you're gonna have a basement no matter what.
Well, I do think you were saying that it does make a difference in terms of reconfiguring the building, correct?
Well, if you said, maybe, yeah. So I mean, what I'm thinking about here is that, I don't know if you can see this, but you can see the footprint of this mechanical space here. It's roughly equivalent to the footprint right here. Right? So this would probably be located over into this corner, and then we would eliminate, the parking per se. We might have to push and pull a little bit here to get these other pieces to work, but
You're basically saying all this space would just collapse to the rear of the building.
correct. Yeah, we
Somehow
have some line
get you.
here
Yeah.
that would be excavated versus unexcavated, or excavated versus shell, and that would just move. We would have less finished space or less excavated space.
So, I mean, if that's a key question, then the related key question is, how much money would we save?
Yeah.
Which is
complicated. If it's on that.
You're on a slope, part of it's excavated, part of it is already excavated because it's on a slope. So now, if you fill that in, does that require a fill?
But I mean, to Debbie's point, when you throw out, oh, it's gonna be 30,000 square feet, you know how people are gonna react. I've also heard underground parking, and they imagine a shopping mall,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Which it's not, we're talking, it's a garage.
Yeah.
We're not talking underground parking for, the entire county. So I do think we need to put a number on it, and I'm not saying that to delay decision-making, but if it is a critical point, then we critically need to know the cost.
Absolutely.
Savings or spending.
And it wouldn't be viable at all if you had a flat site, right?
Well,
It would be much more costly
Right.
to
If you have
tunneling
full
into it.
excavation,
Yeah. But here, it was an opportunity because of the site.
Assuming we don't change the location of the building, you still are going to be building exterior wall that goes around the building full height. It's gonna be a full story of exterior wall, it's just a matter of how much space you have behind it.
So that would change the massing.
Not as we're currently talking about.
And so the basement's gonna shrink on how much you can squeeze out of the court floor. And then their task is, how can I squeeze that out of the clerk floor and still have a functioning clerks, the suites? So that's their tricky job.
I can give you a little preview, is that if you look at the courtroom floor, you can see that this jury deliberation suite right here, which is the one we're talking about eliminating, happens to be mostly in this position, right? So probably our strategy is going to be to take this little projection off, and then you can see what happens on the clerk's floor is you've got some break room space as the primary driver of that. We're going to figure out what to do with the break room. So that'll move somewhere else. And then on the lowest level, it's building storage. Right? So we should be able to figure that out. So, I think the net result of that change is going to be this vertical projection is going to come off probably on all 3 floors. And
Okay.
we'll compress the program back into the building envelope. And then, the kind of A-B choice that we're talking about here is something like this, where the garage comes in for the underground secure parking, or taking it out and then compressing it all back with the back wall as much as possible. So, we can, if the county wishes to, we can get it down and Scott do a sub-pricing exercise. And first of all, price where we are with the changes that we've made. And we've got Front Street reduction in square footage. And then secondly, would we get AB with the underground parking.
Are there extra bathrooms?
I am pretty certain we're at code right now.
That's what I was wondering. And then, just to add to the fun of the conversation, when Mr. Goff decides to retire from all of his fun jobs, and we hire or elect our new Commonwealth's attorney, and that person happens to be a female, where, if a female says, I absolutely need to be in that building, and I'm not just saying a female's gonna be nervous, but I can see how a female may not feel like Mr. Goff does. So, is there room that we could add that space back if we got to that point? 20 years down the road.
I'll take that question and raise it to what happens when the combined court clerk becomes a J&DR clerk and a general district clerk. And so, which is normal in typical localities. And my thought there was, you have this circuit court clerk storage on the main floor. That if you had shelf space in the basement, that longer term storage could go down and that space could be reconfigured into another clerk. Then we get windows. And add to that the question about Commonwealth Attorney Suite, there's nowhere to do it unless they're also somehow in a basement shell built out sometime in the future.
Ms. Smith did bring this up, I think you did, which is that this, I mean, I think in the statute it says we have to provide space, but we have provided space over there. And that could just be one of the things, is that, hey, you don't get space in the building, we've got a perfectly good one. But I hear what you're saying, which is that what if somebody doesn't feel comfortable? But that might, I mean, building that whole new office in there, I don't know that that's even possible. Because if we don't think about it now, how many square feet is your office total?
2,200.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot.
I mean, we had him in here before, until he was kind enough to say, you'll stay where you are. I just, again, we're thinking 25, 50 years down the road, I'm guessing we'll have.
And this concept has 310 square feet for the
And that's
council.
just a meeting area, just to, handle the victims and stuff.
Plus the 40.
And having the Commonwealth witnesses in there before they get called up. That's the issue now. What was that case we had? Where we had 5 forensic scientists. They were, and we needed a place to put, of course, they were in the conference room over my office, which was fine, but still, it was kind of awkward because we had to stall the proceedings to go over there and get them and have them march over there.
Yeah, and so the concept, you have several conference rooms that they could be.
Yeah, that's right.
Positioned, or in your touchdown space.
Yeah.
just felt it necessary to bring that up.
Okay.
So-
Van, you were headed somewhere, I think.
Well, I wanted to know what you needed so we can keep moving forward, because I'm eager to keep moving this project forward.
Yeah.
Right?
So I feel like we're getting somewhere. You've gotten from us what?
Yeah, but I'll recap.
Okay.
So what I understand is that we're keeping 2 courtrooms, and then one of the smaller courtroom will not be jury capable. And we're gonna look at a modification to the jury assembly / deliberation scenario for the other courtroom to see if we can combine those spaces and make them flexible and overlapping, right? So that reduces some potential square footage there. We're going to keep the lower level secure parking in one scenario, and we're going to show a second scenario that eliminates it and get comparative pricing for those 2 options. We also, I guess it's a variability, but something that doesn't need to be decided today is whether you're going to shell the unexcavated space or keep it as unexcavated. You know, that's a choice, and you just basically pull the line back and decide how much space you want. And
Should there be a comparison cost-wise, what do you call it, a sub pricing exercise?
Yeah, and actually, Downey Set's already done that. They pretty much said that it's a cost per square foot thing, and gave us a cost per square foot. So, and it's probably, I mean, if you did 2 square feet, it's gonna be more expensive than 1,000, but, yeah.
Is it also possible in the square footage, the secure parking estimate, to give us an idea about realistically how much it would cost to get secure parking outside?
That's already included.
Okay, but specifically for the
Oh,
judges?
as a breakout?
Yes.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You're asking for 2 secure parking areas, one for judges and one for other staff?
Oh, interesting. Maybe we weren't talking about that. So I see what you're saying, that if we reduce, I got it, never mind.
We have
I see.
secure
I
parking
see.
built in right now.
And it would be key card,
Yeah.
everybody that needs to be in there, and it would just accommodate.
And I think there
So
are maybe
it's
10 spaces or something out there. that
You're
could-
asking about that compared to.
Yeah. So I was just gonna make sure that, yeah.
And I don't think there's a need to make that probably larger without the under built-in parking. I think it holds about 10 or so people, 10 cars, and that is either have the judges or not.
And this might be a silly question, but that secure parking is literally attached to the building, correct?
It's, the
So
fence
it's-
closes.
It's, you enter a door and then nobody else.
So you see it right here?
I'll put it on the screen.
Okay.
And how can you get in there?
So there's a gate right here that
Oh,
you
I see.
come through, and then there's a secure door.
I see. Okay.
And then you roll down.
So that means the judges would go through 2 secure,
Right, a judge would drive down, go through a gate, go through a door,
And then door.
And without the underground parking, the judges would just park in this back lot that is fenced off. And where is the Sallyport entrance?
over here.
Go to the left, yes.
Okay, so we have sheriff's office, sheriff's deputies coming through that same parking lot.
Yeah.
We can make,
Now, of course, any inmates would be in a vehicle
sure.
and would not get out of the vehicle until the garage door was closed. And that, normally, I mean, I think the definition of cellar port is the garage door can never open when the other door is open. Only one door is, it's interlocked, right? Only one door can open.
And I'll just add that creates somewhat of the same problem that we have now is when the litigants are able to identify our vehicles. So that's,
So the
it's
fence
not,
would-
it's not a matter of getting out and attacking us, or it's just them being able to say, oh, Judge drives, it's a blue Kia. So, I don't know.
That you have that risk at Food Line as well.
Of course, of course. And I have that risk in Tokyo that I get out and my car is parked on the street in front of the courthouse. So,
They've got a big project ahead, I
we'll see.
Okay, so what else do we need to?
I think that's it for us. I mean,
Unless there's any other direction and any other,
So
what we talked about here relatively small changes to the space
I
program.
understand.
Just want to make sure we're all clear about that.
I had a question about when you clearly stated that you would likely reconfigure this to knock off that I forgot what projection. Does that or does that not relate to the 10% magic reduction that you discussed earlier? In other words, can we push you to 20% with that?
I'm not making any hard promises.
But was that part of
I
your
just
10
heard
or-
20%.
Was that part of your 10 though, or not?
I was thinking more globally, you know, the
Okay.
whole building, looking at critically and shrinking, and then this is in addition to that.
Okay.
You know. But I'm hedging because I have to push some things back.
Yeah,
into
no,
the
I'm not.
building, you know, so.
I'm not putting you on the spot on that. No, but I just want to be clear for the public to know that you're talking about 10% as sort of just a revisiting of the configuration of the building as a whole. And then there is this, based on the different program changes, there is the opportunity to eliminate that one additional protrusion. in the
And
building.
they have this game of Tetris where
Yeah.
to get it to fit exactly right is a magical thing,
Right.
and it's hard to do. And this concept doesn't do it because it's at the concept level. And as they refine it, they'll get it more and more compact.
Caitlin Struckman, our circuit clerk, she did great work in pulling together information from other small counties. We've done other similar analysis for other big decisions on salaries and things like that in the past for county personnel. And I do think it's a very useful baseline benchmark, however you want to describe it. My question to you is, since you're in the civic building business, do you have available to you data that we could look at that would get into more of the minutia of how those courthouses are configured in terms of, especially the ones, I'm thinking of the Bath counties of the world that are like us in terms of population, and I believe I have a speeding ticket in one of the case numbers up here, so I'm not the only one. Bath is tough, but it would be interesting to know the small population counties that, like Bath, that have 2 courtrooms, to know how large those courtrooms are.
Yeah, we can certainly see what we can find out. Some are available online that you can figure out.
Yeah.
Some may not be.
But that's outside our current scoping, right? We would have to pay extra for that, and can't we do that in-house?
Yeah, I can call my peers.
I'll dig around for it.
I mean, that's what I'm saying, is why don't we keep that in-house? I don't wanna ask you to do more work that then we're paying for,
I was just
that we
curious.
can do ourselves.
I was just curious if you had the data.
I don't have enough data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you again for doing that, Caitlin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this will be
it's-
on the website.
That's really super useful to
Yep.
see.
It's interesting to look at Bath County though, it's larger or square miles than Rappahannock is. Borders 4 of the counties and West Virginia. See, I don't know what's going on the West Virginia side. Rappahannock borders 5 counties. So y'all, you really create a region, what's going on in the region, not,
Yeah.
if y'all are lucky, you can preserve, you'll have 7,300 people in 100 years from now, but Lord knows what happens around
You're right.
in those 5 counties.
You're right.
And
We have in the national park, they have the homestead.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
bringing a lot of people in, a lot of traffic, and it's just a lot of activity.
Do they have a town? Is it all villages? I think it's all villages.
I don't think there's incorporated.
I don't think there's any
Monterey's
town
in
either.
Highland,
Monterey's Highland.
Yeah.
So they get to keep all their meals and lodging.
All right, anything else, board
And we
members?
have
So do you feel comfortable that you've gotten from us what you need?
I think so, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we'll talk to Gary about what the next steps are. There's some, cost estimation costs here we're gonna need to get a quote for, and reworking the concept to a new configuration, modified configuration.
And what should we expect from you timeline-wise? Is this the next month, 2 months? How should we be thinking about it?
We want to actually get it done as quickly as possible, because we want to get to the next stage.
Okay.
So I'd say within the next couple of weeks, we should be able to give you back what you need.
Okay.
So you asked him if he heard everything. Did board members and planning oversight committee members, did you get everything out that you wanted to make sure was heard and discussed tonight?
More attendant matters and not exactly related to the new courthouse design. But I do think that this is a multi-front project. And I think Mr. Luke was right in that we have to start looking at the financing aspects of the new courthouse and seeing what we can do to lessen the pain of the financing for that, or seeing what our options are. And of course, the other front that we'll be working on is the restoration of the rest of the historic campus. And to that end, I know I've mentioned before, Morale Calbian has mentioned that she worked with, I think, Leesburg on their historic courthouse, and there may be some opportunity for us to get some grant money there. And she's an excellent resource for anything, any historic building. So I would encourage my peers to engage her. And then the other items, of course, that we need to remember for cost savings is that we do want to get out of that rental space. And then the campus or the building that we have out on 211 up by the library, I really think we need to sell that property, and that may be a future conversation. But that's a way that we can say, well, you know, we have this asset, we're willing to part with it, and that will help offset the cost of the new courthouse. And just building that story of what we can get away from paying, or what we can realize in revenue to offset this cost. Because it is shocking for a county this size.
Yeah, well said.
All right, I so appreciate that you all are staying engaged and so willing to come out
Thank you.
so close to the last meeting. Thank you very much.
So when will we get the idea of what the rest of the campus looks like, where people are going to park? And
So we talked a little bit about that. The community uses street parking now for patrons visiting the court, and I think that's a vision going forward. It's a cost-saving matter. It's something that has to be discussed with the town. It would eliminate expanses of asphalt. And then staff parking is expanded to the rear of the building. So those, if the board wants to plan out additional parking spaces like the earlier concept had, they would likely run out towards Warren Ave like the old concept. But I think this town has accommodated street parking for a long time. For a court or courts that are used, not every day, but court days, there are benefits. You're putting cars and people next to the businesses who want to get them rather than tucked in a parking lot out back.
If I may mention, from the town's perspective, the Inn has recently mandated that all of its employees stop on Main Street, so it's freed up considerably more parking space.
Thank you.
We'll be in good shape.
All right, if everybody has said what they needed to say, entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
we don't want to talk about the Blue Rock tonight. We're going to leave that until next month.
Please.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
everybody.
Thank you.